Alright, we're going to get started. So, to start us out, communication audit. We chose to do our communication audit with Culinary Dropout. And so to get us started, we can go to the next slide. Get us started with a little icebreaker. We have a question for you. Just by a show of hands, how many of you have a job? Okay. Now, how many of you have a job that you're not necessarily satisfied with your boss? Your superior, your manager, whoever it is that you work for, you're not really entirely happy. Yeah, you might want to get careful with that one. Okay, well, just so you know, you're definitely not alone. There's tons of employees that are out there in the workforce right now that are currently very unsatisfied with their job. And so one of the main reasons for that is management. And that was kind of our mindset. The idea that we had going into this communication audit was to try to figure out exactly what Culinary Dropout was facing as far as a dilemma was concerned. So in response to that, what we did was we took a poll, basically a survey of the employees that currently work there. And so we constructed the common complaints graph. And so it didn't necessarily fall into like very specific categories. We basically just got, general responses of, like for example, the most popular, unclear direction. Most of the people that we talked to didn't feel like they were confident in the work that they were doing, and they didn't feel like the management that they had above them wasn't really confident in overseeing their abilities and their qualities. Following that was insufficient recognition. So a lot of the times, most of these employees felt like they were lacking as far as incentives. They weren't, necessarily getting bonuses, or maybe they weren't getting promoted as quickly enough. They didn't have a high enough raise percentage yet. So that was another, that came in second for the common complaints. And then third and fourthly, the lack of time and refusing to meet. A lot of them had issues with management just simply not having time to talk to them, or just refusing to meet with them, or just never being around to talk to. And so those were kind of the more common complaints that we found out. And conversely, the other graph over here is just to demonstrate to you that when a manager has high talent or high skills, that it's more conceptual as far as having a higher productivity and higher experience rate. So that just kind of sums up what we found from the American Manager Report.
Alright, goals. So coming up with goals was important because it kind of sets like an objective for our project. And we had 4 goals. So the first goal was to determine the flaw in this organization, and specifically in terms of communication, because that's what our project is about. Then we wanted to find a mutual solution to fix the problem and at the same time better the company. We also wanted to improve the workplace relationships between coworkers, and we wanted to increase the amount of communication going on throughout the company.
So what we did is we interviewed various employees and managers that worked at Culinary Dropout. Kyle and I both interviewed actual employees, while Michael, Gabe, and Johnny interviewed higher level management. So we got kind of like both a horizontal distribution in the managers, multiple managers, and also in the employees, multiple employees, but also vertical between the managers and the employees. So once we actually started the interview, one of the first questions we asked was about scheduling. And there seemed to be a lot of tension that came up with that topic. So we kind of pushed that a little bit further, and we discovered that there was a lot of scheduling conflicts that were happening. And the reason for this was poor communication because through the vertical between managers and employees. There wasn't a lot of verbal communication. A lot of it was done through an app online, and so that can fail, and there's not a lot of personality that gets involved with that. So they weren't allowed to stress importance of certain scheduling conflicts. Some of our other questions, we found that there was a little bit of frustration with the new employees that were coming in. And as we pushed that further, we saw that there was some poor horizontal communication as well. Specifically, there was a lack of training that was going on between the new employees and the managers and the older employees, and this was causing a lot of frustration and tension between the employees themselves.
Yeah, so as Malachi mentioned, and getting the answers from the questions, and we come up with 3 overview of our problem and solution. The first is due to the poor communication and make it they use the app very frequently and not in person, and that's one of the problem. And the disconnect teammates, we said we interview the manager and the employees, and between them there's not much connection enough. And the third one is insufficient training. Like the person who is responsible for training the employees is not well trained enough. And the solutions will be the common box, like put in a black box on the wall, and everyone have the opinion could put in, and the weekly meetings and the training regulations. And the following members will talk more about it.
Yeah, so the first problem seems to be obviously a lack of communication, mostly vertical communication. In my interview, I discovered that, like they said, the main form of communication is through the app called Hot Schedules. It makes people's voices feel like they're not heard sometimes, especially if you're putting in requests for days off, time off. I know that a lot of the times they don't acknowledge that. Like me, I have class on Thursdays until 5:45, and they still schedule me at 6 p.m. on Thursdays, which is really annoying to me. Like John mentioned, the solution to that would be creating a suggestion box. I also discovered in my interview that the employees seem to have a lack of coercion between each other as well, mostly with like table numbers and seat numbers and being able to be on the same page with everything, which obviously is another lack of communications. The solution to that would be mandatory weekly meetings, just so that way everyone could say any problems that they had throughout the week, any way they could fix it.
And so just to touch up on the mandatory weekly meetings, what we want to propose is that the majority of the staff that works in the restaurant, no matter if it's going to dropout or not, it's pretty safe to say that you're going to be working a weekend shift, whether that be a Saturday or a Sunday. So that was kind of what we wanted to gear towards, so that we'd have the most presence, we'd have the most attendance, and that way the message would definitely get across. But to bring us to our third point, which is insufficient training, this is kind of a widespread problem throughout the restaurant industry. And typically what you'll have is when you work in a restaurant, you'll have about anywhere between 2 and 3 shifts of training where you'll shadow somebody, where you'll have the opportunity to see somebody else do the work